My name is Sam Jenks, and welcome to another episode of The Way We Source, a podcast hosted by Kodiak Hub, where we share our talks with procurement practitioners, leaders, experts, consultants, content gurus, and people that we find downright inspiring, diving into the role that sourcing and procurement plays in the way we live. If you like today's episode, as always, make sure to rate the program and give us a follow. Today, we have the pleasure of hosting a practitioner with a capital P. During his 25 plus years in procurement at businesses such as Air Canada, Unilever, Teva Pharmaceuticals, and Adidas, he's accrued a unique perspective of the role of procurement from a plethora of different industry verticals. Sharing those insights with us today, we look forward to hearing more to understand how people and leadership, as well as change, play a role significantly in the role of procurement. Most recently, he's responsible for a team of 90 plus, serving prior as the head of Indirect Procurement in EMEA and CIS at Philips. Daniel G. Wilson. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Hey, Sam. What a great intro. Thanks for being here. I really appreciate it.
Well, when you have a CV like that, it's pretty easy to be able to give a good intro. You know, you're pretty much like the Alex Rodriguez of procurement in some aspects. How does that feel?
Another great analogy. Thank you. And even though hockey is my thing, always welcome a baseball analogy as well.
Yeah,
but,
for sure.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, Daniel, how did you get into the space of procurement? Did it choose you or did you choose the role?
Yeah, I think it chose me, right? I mean, so my first role was at Air Canada, and we were part of a strategic sourcing team, right? So there we basically did a full-blown outsourcing to an organization called ISM, which was formerly known as, IBM. And it was a complete outsourcing, and it was a small team responsible for managing that relationship. And that was about the procuring of goods and services for IT. And so it had a very much of an outsourcing flavor to it, but it was ultimately a strategic sourcing procurement role. I didn't get involved in the purchasing of parts and stuff for airplanes. And that was really the start of my procurement career. I thought, this is interesting, right? You're talking about outsourcing, BPO providers, negotiating with suppliers. We started to this early days of outsourcing things to India for low-cost country and talent and knowledge. Really exciting. So it chose me, actually.
Very cool. I mean, 20 plus years in the space. You obviously are still passionate about the space from the sounds of it. What's a topic in procurement that gets you excited still, something that gets you out of the bed in the morning?
Yeah, for me, what I've always enjoyed about my career is I've been very fortunate to join organizations where they were embarking on a procurement transformation. So they would look to create a 3-year strategy, plan, and execute on indirect procurement. And the organizations I joined have said, hey, we've always got this mature direct organization, but we struggle with indirects. And I've been very fortunate because every one of those companies you've named was in some way a procurement transformation. And it's all about sort of demonstrating the value of what procurement and individuals can do in this space, right? It's about influencing, it's about driving change. It's about going from maturity level 1 to a maturity level X, right? And so what's made me really passionate is that you're also working in this tech space, right? Technologies to facilitate procurement processes. But most importantly, it's always about working with people. It's always about driving change. And as you see in the last 5 years, this explosion of new tech, right? AI, Gen AI, and the plethora of tools in the tech space now, procurement space, which is just, amazing. And it's really exciting. So now you start to look into these areas and go, gee, I had a problem for this, 10 years ago that's never been solved. And now all of a sudden I got a specific tool that can do that. What does that look like? How does that work? How do I bring it into an ecosystem? How do I play with it? Yeah. So a bit like a kid who likes to play with toys, as a procurement person, I like to play with all this different tech and see what works and what doesn't.
Very cool. You mentioned there that, you've come into organizations, and obviously organizations that we mentioned like Air Canada, Unilever, Teva Pharma, Adidas, as well as then Philips, right? They're selling a thing. The product is what's being procured and the parts and the components for that product.
Yeah.
With that being said, you also mentioned that indirects wasn't as quite as mature, and they were going on a journey in those organizations. Why do you think that there is that dichotomy typically in businesses that indirects is quote unquote slightly more immature in some aspects.
So I think a lot of it connects into supply chains, right? And ultimately the end consumer, right? That's the end game. You're building a product like running shoes to sell to a consumer. So if the running
Right.
shoe doesn't get manufactured on time, why is that? What's the supplier? What's the problem? Why is, a container stuck at customs? Why is it not getting to the consumer? Why is the product quality not good? And I'm just using it as an example. I'm not
Sure,
suggesting.
because it in the end impacts the top line, right?
So everyone sees, wow, top line, impact on top line, need to
Right.
do something about it to ensure, security, supply, and everything. And I just think it's a focus when you start to look at a product, it's very tangible, right? Things when you do are far more tangible in the space and as it connects to customers. And again, on social media and everything, you see what a shoe looks like and all the
Right.
components around it. And so I naturally feel that, yeah, that's the focus of organizations, right? Organizational transformations are big in themselves. Directs tends to have large organizations, engineering teams, product teams, development teams, sometimes very complex intellectual property, right, on products and things. So there's a lot of complexity going into it. You want to ensure you've got the right sort of procurement focus in there. The
Yeah.
indirect space is sort of, well, we can handle it somehow loosey-goosey through various other policies and through HR or through procurement or marketing or even through the business, right? Because it doesn't touch the end product. And you
Right.
could argue marketing does, but in other areas, it's really there to enable the business, right? Not direct to consumer.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously, we all know from experience and hearing stories, when the business owns indirect procurement, that's where maverick spend starts and that tail starts to grow, right? And obviously, there's a lot of savings to be had there. There's a lot of value to be driven there, as you mentioned as well, right?
Yeah.
Innovation can easily come from the indirect space as well. You mentioned it before, right? The technology space is booming in procurement and other areas of technology as well in other categories. I'm just curious from your perspective, working in indirects for the majority of your career, do you believe that procurement teams separate the two a bit too much, or are they closer and should be more aligned than they are in a lot of organizations?
Yeah, I do, because ultimately when you're sourcing two different things and you need sort of two different disciplines, procurement is procurement, right? It doesn't matter what you source. There is a process, there is a way of doing things, and you are collaborating with suppliers, whether they're high-tech suppliers or they're with, again, indirect suppliers. What happens in an organization is the business looks at you and says, hey, who do I talk to for procurement matters, whether it's direct or indirect, right? So when I'm working in verticals such as personal health or image guided therapy, such as Philips, the business wants to talk to one procurement person, right? And so, but then who do they talk to? Because they're not sure whether their problem is, HR, marketing, manufacturing related, or is it directs related? And so if you start to create these structures in direct and indirects, and hey, I'm a business partner for the directs for the business of toothbrushes, yeah, but I'm the procurement business partner for the marketing aspect of, then it brings complexity, right? And so, and I even see at a level within indirect procurements where, these new operating models like spend management, you say, well, we're going to create a team that does cost category. They're the strategy. They do think tank kind of stuff, right? And then you got the sourcing teams. They're going to be just sourcing things. Well, who's talking to who, right? And if you start to create too much organizational complexity within procurement, the business gets lost. They just won't work with you or engage with you, or they'll just say the classic things: your processes are too complex, your organization is too complex.
Right.
I don't know who to speak to. And so I do think change is possibly needed on the business partnering side. Certainly the ones that are client facing, you might want to centralize, or the industry should start thinking about how do you better serve your customers. And it's a challenge, right?
100%. Well, okay. Let's say like this: clean slate. What does a best in class team look like in procurement in 2024? A procurement organization that can service the business and is, cutting through the noise. Big question, of course.
Yeah, and it's a loaded one, right? I mean, when I go back into my procurement career, the thing that I always see is, and that's still a problem today, is customer service, right? And we always talk about the Amazon experience, right? So if you're designing something in mind, it's how do I get someone to procure and buy through me or with me?
Hmm.
And I still see the challenge of, compliance driven, policy driven, but ultimately, how do we're not even talking about getting a seat at the table, because I think you need to earn that right. How do you enable an organization to do things smarter and faster?
Hmm.
And so, and nowadays with all this tech coming on board, where do you start? Because you can say, well, I'll throw money at source to pay. For me, a 90-day plan would certainly be sitting down with all the heads of business and asking them, what are your pain points? What are you looking for? What experiences do you want out of the organization? Where are the areas where you see the greatest risk and spend, and where do you need the most help? And you build an operating model based on the needs of the business that involves, hey, Mr. Business, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? Right? And it's trying to solve their problems and putting people and resources onto those problems and challenges. The tech comes secondary, right? And then you talk about operating models and category managers and those things. But clean slate again is it's very hard to move away from legacy systems. And I think really that relationship, the business acumen becomes the most important thing. And you're solving a small problem first, and then you're growing, because it enables buy-in later on down the road, because the business owns the budget. They're the decision makers. As procurement, you're the influencer. So how do I influence someone to do things differently? And you got to start small. And that may take more time than just saying, here's a, operational, tactical, strategic procurement team, and here's Ariba, and here's all these things.
Right.
Not even sure some of these tech platforms make sense for the business, even though we're doing it. So I think it takes a lot of engagement with the business to really try to design and co-create an organization that enables them.
Great insights. You're not only obviously a practitioner with a capital P, you can hear it from the way you talk. You're a leader with a capital L.
Thanks.
What does it take to be able to transition, right, from that IC, that individual contributor role, to a leadership role in procurement in 2024? And also within that, any words of advice or wisdom you could pass along to those that are looking to make that transition could be interesting to hear.
Yeah, I think in a way, early on your career, your hard work ethic is obviously number one, right? It's sort of the way I was raised. I was also raised in an environment of team sports, right? So I played competitive ice hockey and baseball. And of course, being able to work in a team is fundamental, right? I think it's what's helped me throughout my career to be able to manage a team, is because I understand team dynamics, I understand team challenges, and I understand you win as a team or you lose as a team, right? I think words of wisdom I would say is you'll need to stand out in some way, shape, or form, right? Hard work, results, and again, leading by example, right? So saying, hey, I'm someone who has a can-do attitude. I can fix this. I can solve this.
Yeah.
Someone who's willing to say, it's not really my job description, is not going to help, right? Yeah. But to say, I'm going to roll up my sleeves and I'm going to work on this problem. It may not be my area. It may not be my expertise, but I'll learn something and I'll do the work. And I think that also requires a little bit of self-promotion, marketing. You need to be visible to the right people, and be able to understand the network of things in the organization, right? Who is someone who can help me grow and develop? Who can I get as a sponsor or a champion? And also, Sam, I think it's just a little bit of luck, timing, and opportunity, right? I mean, a lot of people's careers, whether they go from director to senior director to VP or CPO, it's timing and opportunity, right? Are they flexible to move anywhere in the world? Are they open to trying something completely different? And sometimes, values and other things such as family can get in the way of these things, right? But ultimately being true to yourself and being authentic and wanting to help people and wanting to help people be successful and elevating people versus leveraging people to elevate yourself, I think are the ways to getting into leadership roles.
Yeah, amazing insight. So what I picked out there is, of course, lead by example. be able to speak about your own capabilities, right? Be able to market ferociously and network ferociously in certain aspects.
Yeah.
Luck, opportunity, but seize it when it's there. But what is luck, right? A mix of good timing and hard work. And as
Yeah.
you also said, elevate those around you, right? Being able to coach and build more, right? That's what good leadership looks like. I'm curious, where do you think that your background, you mentioned it a little bit, in sports plays into leadership in business?
Part of it was my upbringing. So my brother played very competitive baseball. And he played in the U.S. for Alabama, and then he had a chance to get a scholarship for the Montreal Expos farm team. But he turned it down, and he learned a lot of valuable lessons from some of the coaches that taught him some of these life lessons, and he was able to impart them with me at a young age. And I used that through my own till playing sports till today. And again, these are just sort of grounded in my own values, right? And what you learn at an early age from a coach who says something that has impact. And you go years later and you go, wow, I can't believe, he said that to me. And I still remember this conversation about leadership and these kind of things. And I still play competitive ice hockey today, right? So I apply those behaviors in even what I do. I'm not the team captain. I'm a defenseman. But if I have a chance to give feedback and to coach and guide the younger guys and give direction, I do it, right?
Yeah.
One of the recent examples is we have this girl in our basketball team that I coach, and I'm the assistant coach. And it's her third year in the first team. And, she went up to the head coach and she said, hey, I want to be team captain. And he said, well, I don't think you're ready, and this and that, and yada, yada, yada. And she's had a bit of a tough year. And the coach is a little bit tough. And then, she was sort of in tears. And I pulled her aside and I said, hey, so what's up? She says, yeah, I really want to be captain, and he's not making me captain. I said, listen, it's clear to me after 5 games and all the trainings, you're the leader in this team, right? You bring the girls together. When you start to fool around and mess around in the trainings, all the girls do the same. When you get serious and push the girls and ask them to do better and lead by example, they all follow you. You don't need to be team captain to be a leader. So lead just by example, lead by being who you are, and let the team captain, nomination come to you at some point. And if it doesn't matter, because people like me recognize that you are a leader. Keep doing what you're doing. And off she went. And right. So she no longer cares about a title. She now knows, oh, so I'm being recognized for being a leader. And she's leading the team, and the team are undefeated this year under her leadership. Right? It's a 13-year-old girl. It's amazing. So again, it's how you also narrate the story to some of these people and kids, right? What they can do without necessarily them having the title or the responsibility. They got to go out and find it, right? And make it for themselves.
Great insights. I mean, what do they say? People don't want to be managed. They want to be led, right? And a good leader leads people by also helping them lead themselves, right? As a leader, I mean, how does one also, though, stay close to the pulse of the craft, right? Because I think that this is a typical, especially in the industry I'm coming from, obviously, and I think that it permeates to all industries, but in technology, obviously, good individual contributors become managers, become directors, become VPs, become C-suite, right? But not only the best individual contributor is not always the best leader. At the same time, they might have the ability to be able to move that way. But as you become a director, become a head of a VP, you do get further and further away from the IC role. How do you make sure that you keep yourself relevant and stay inserted in the day to day? How are you doing that during the times that you've been in leadership roles?
It's a really good question, and I think you sort of hit it on the head, right? Not every good, individual contributor, and they might deliver great results. The what might be fantastic, but the how may be something completely different, right? And we've all seen it. I've seen it in my career where I've questioned promotions and been pie-bassed for promotions where you go, well, that's an odd choice. Well, what happened there? And I've seen it, right? And I've had to coach and tell people why they didn't get a promotion and someone else did. When you go, yeah, they don't seem to be a better leader. And it happens, right? And you can't control that. You can only control what you can do and how you actually behave. And so I think as a leader, it's really important that the further, you go up in the hierarchy, the less into the details you're in ultimately, right? And I've had that challenge myself. I had to look at marketing and HR and IT and logistics and facilities management and energy. I'm reliant on so many people, 92 people, to do their job. And at any point in time, I need to understand something, because if I got to go in front of the executive board or a key stakeholder and say, why is this happening and what's happening in this category, I need to speak to it, right? Because I'm the leader of that team. Now, what I like to do is I like to bring the content experts, to bring them forward and put them in front of leaders and say, you know what, you're the expert here. You explain it to them, because I don't want to explain your work. It would take me far too long to get into the details, right? Give me the good understanding. Let me go into a level of detail. Let me understand it. But ultimately, I like to put people in front of leadership or even the board, saying, you know what, you're the expert. You go and talk to them.
Yeah. And that's about empowering people that you talked about before, right?
It is, right? And so I don't want to move away from the question is, as a leader, Dan, but are you still getting involved day to day? When I'm needed, I will get involved day to day. I've had this fascination now, again, with the tech space and data and everything. And I think as leaders, we're being asked to be more data oriented. And I'm very high red, very high yellow, and green and blue are sort of, down there. It's changed a bit over the years through leadership. So it's red, yellow, green, blue. But you're being so much more now in this world of tech that you need to be understanding data and the insights from it. So you have to get involved into the details. And every once in a while, I deep dive, I go in, I try to understand it. And I show the team that I care, right? I show them, hey, don't just walk me through it for the sake, but really explain it to me, because I want to understand and learn. And again, that's what helps. They show that when you put time into them, they appreciate it.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that one of the things that you hit on there is, staying close to the pulse is all about curiosity and really caring deeply, right? Which are two of our values here. And I think that they're important for anyone that's in a leadership position or in a professional position in any company. When it comes to kind of, you mentioned, right, empowering others, bringing them up to the forefront so that they can be able to talk about their own craft, right? Which I think is a great way of ensuring that people, their voices are heard, their work is recognized, right?
Yeah.
What do they say? Surround yourselves with people that will say your name in a room that you're not in, right? And talk about you positively. I'm curious, do you have any kind of tips or tricks? Do you have kind of a cadence within your weeks or your months that you are checking in with teams? And if so, do you have any tips to other leaders that are out there that are looking to try and make sure that they can stay close to the pulse of what's going on in an organization that's as robust as yours?
Yeah, I mean, COVID was a great example of, if you can't meet with your teams in different countries and travel, then you have this great tool called, Teams, right? And so I think it comes down to behavior, right? As a leader, the impact you have on multiple people, which I call the multiplier effect, is really significant when you invest, right? And I always invest in my first line, because I know that the 5 or 6 or 7 people that are managing the remainder of the 90 or 80 some odd people, they have a big impact on them and vice versa. So for me, the connects with my leadership team are always important, and always with a clear agenda. How are the people doing? Are there any pain points? Where can we help them? And so, and sometimes what I like to do is I like to do sort of roadmaps, right? Quarterly roadmaps or annual roadmaps, updated every quarterly, across people, process, technology. Guys, here's what we're doing on training and learning and development. Here's what we're doing on this. We like to set up coffee corners where you're talking to 3 or 4 people, or just even one-to-ones every once in a while, right? And again, a big team is hard because you've got 92 people times, half an hour every couple of months is, right. And I've been through this. You're spending a lot of time talking to people. But in the case where recently Philips was going under some massive changes and reorganization and people were losing their jobs, that became my priority, right? Because they were concerned. Hey, I saw this announcement. Am I going to be impacted? We're going to outsource to X, Y, and Z. Will I be impacted? What's going to happen? What can I do? And right. So you have to help these people, right? So you need to spend more time with your people at the expense of, doing a PowerPoint presentation to management on the numbers and quarterly savings and all that. But can't have one without the other. And I've always erred on the side of people. You look after your people first, the numbers will look after themselves.
Yeah, for sure, and I think that's a good way to go about it. Jensen Huang, the one of the founders of NVIDIA, he's famous for having 30 something reports and saying, "I don't have one-to-ones." Right? I wish that was the case, that everybody was that talented. I'm curious, do you have a format for your one-to-ones that you feel like works? You gave a little insight there with roadmap, but I think that one-to-ones are such an interesting concept, especially when you get to that layer that, of course, you're managing managers, right, or leading leaders themselves. Do you have any tips or tricks in the way that you work with your one-to-ones to be able to make sure that you make impact within the next line?
It's a bit like career progression, right? I mean, I always try to help move talent along, right? I don't want to get to a position, and it's never once has it happened to me where talent came to me and said, look, if I don't get promoted, I'm leaving, or I need a change, right? I'm always having that dialogue. I know that after 2 years, it's probably a good time for someone to think about something different. So I sort of preempt the conversation. I do the same thing with people, right? I tell them, what do they want out of me for 30 minutes? They just want a conversation. They want to talk about something that's bothering them. They want to give me feedback. So I let people decide what the agenda is. If I decide what the agenda, I want to know your update on your 90-day plan. I want to know how you're doing on savings. Then it becomes a conversation about what I want, not what they need. And so if I emphasize on what they need, and if it's just the check-in, then I'm okay with it, right? They need to use that 20 minutes, 30 minutes to the best they feel. If I do have a particular topic, I'll say, and I won't put it structurally in the agenda because that might make people nervous. I might send them a Teams note and say, hey, I just want a quick update on this issue that, the board is asking me about. Can we talk about that in the next call as well? It's no big deal. But I just want your view on this. And then you kind of diffuse a little bit of, something's wrong. No, nothing's wrong. Just heads up. I need to manage up. So I need some input on this.
Yeah.
But, rarely that happens. But it does. Then at least people know that when they're coming into a meeting, they don't have this anxiety. What's he going to say? What's he want? I always try to, set expectations beforehand.
And focusing, of course, on allowing, the other individual on the other side of that one-to-one, come with their expectations also inherently gives you an understanding of what's their driving forces, right? What are the things that make them tick? How can I be able to improve this person's day to day? And I think that's incredibly good insights, as a leader myself, and also I'm sure to others that are out there listening. When it comes to technology, because I want to shift gears a little bit, you mentioned that it's something that obviously you've really, tried to dive deeper into. I saw you, of course, at DPW. We didn't even have the opportunity to talk when we were there, but we brushed shoulders, or I would think we were two ships in the night. But obviously, tech is on everybody's tongue right now, right? I'm curious, what do you think are some of the pillars to a transformation project, a legitimate one within the space of procurement?
I think, too many times we're trying to solve problems with tech, right? And I see too many times in organization, but this process is a mess. This isn't working, but this piece of tech will fix it for us. And I just think it's the wrong way. I think you need to really look at processes, Kaizen approach, or anything. How do we simplify? What's the perspective of the customer? And once you've simplified something, you go, wow, this is really simple. Well, how do we digitize it? How do we make it even more user-friendly, autonomous, intuitive? I see a vision for procurement to be a little bit self-serving, right? I'd like to spend time talking to strategic suppliers and how do we drive top-line growth and ESG and sustainability and let procurement sort of do its thing autonomously, right? Self-service, let the business go in and do their thing and procurement can put in checks and controls. And I think that's really important, right?
100%. I mean, when you see that the businesses think that, sometimes technology is going to be the solving, I mean, it's got to lead with process and people, right? You and I both know that. And I think that's also what sometimes procurement gets wrong. When it comes down to it, though, do you see some barriers that are in organizations sometimes to adopting new technology?
Yeah, I think, coming back to the transformation objectives, I was just thinking about it again. we fail to ask the question, what's the problem we're trying to solve, right?
Right.
We don't seriously do that. No, we got to rush and see your budget. I need money. I got to get the tech in. I'm doing this pilot with company XYZ. But what's the problem you're trying to solve, right? When you talk about failure of technology and programs, and it's all over LinkedIn, 80% of transformations fail, and etc. So what's the problem you're trying to solve? Great. When you know the problem, what are the business requirements, right? What's the requirements? What are we really trying to achieve and get out of it? How do you translate that into something that goes into the market and say, here's the problem I'm trying to solve, and this is what I needed to do.
Right.
So that's fundamental, I think, in any transformation. Other things like having a business case, having, a good return on investment, again, solving a burning platform is also really important. Again, it could be not just a problem, but is there a burning platform? What's the communication plan? And the other thing that I feel we miss out on, especially now, is training, right? Far too much do I see transformations. There's an HR business partner involved to give guidance, but I think HR needs to be at the core of transformations. You're talking about changing the way people do things.
Yep.
You're talking about changing their job, changing their mindset, changing their mentality. And as much as I love change and I love to drive change, and I think I know how to drive change, some people are scared shitless. They don't know what to do. They freeze. How do I change? This is my job. I don't want to lose my job.
Yeah.
And so there's this fear factor, right? And I think HR needs to play a bigger role in that entire transformational piece from a people perspective. And I think those are the major pillars, right?
For sure. You hit on something that also I think is important to highlight again, right? 80-something% of projects, within technology and procurement space fail, right? They're unsuccessful implementations. They're mismanaged. The adoption level isn't there. Mm-hmm. I think that the other side of that coin is that, Gartner had a study back in end of 2013 that mentioned that 17% of the solutions that procurement wants to buy, they get, right? That's a sliver of those solutions. The question, I guess, is procurement getting in their own way there, right? Because they're looking at the solution that they want more so than the problem that they're trying to solve or the ROI they're trying to deliver, right? I'm curious, do you think that going to the market with the problem and then co-creating and working together with vendors is the right approach? Because in our perspective as a ProcureTech vendor, there's two sides of this coin, right? There's the vendor, there's the practitioners that go to market, and they truly are trying to transform, and they're truly trying to understand what the market has to offer. And they come with, requirements and expectations, but they're also malleable. Whereas there's the other side of that coin where, practitioners go to market and they keep their cards so close to their chest that it ends up becoming a hinder for them. Why do you think that is the case? Like, why does that culture exist in procurement still? And also, how do you think that we can start to change that culture a bit?
So again, I think HR plays an important role, right? So again, it's mindset. And I've been very fortunate when I worked at Unilever, they had this program called Partner to Win. That entire philosophy is no company can succeed without suppliers, right? And they fundamentally believe on breaking down barriers and saying, we need to co-create. We need to have procurement co-create with the business new solutions, new innovations, new go-to-market strategies, in an ecosystem that allows them to give a competitive advantage. I still feel today procurement treats suppliers as vendors, as transactional, right? And I hate to say this being a procurement practitioner, but if I can bypass the procurement process and do a tender, all right, and choose a supplier and say, hey, I've got a great relationship with the board member and they got a great idea, and I think they can solve a problem that I have, then I want to co-create with them, right? I want to bring them under NDA, that's fine. But I want to sit down and have a conversation versus your traditional, 3 bids and a buy. We need to do a sourcing process. And that's the hindering part, right? Not every single thing goes into this sourcing process. Sometimes they're just conversations. You see now we talk about procurement orchestration, right? There's a few parties in the marketplace. Which one is the right fit for any organization? Well, I just don't think nowadays you can do an RFP for a source to pay platform. You got Jaeger and Coupa and SAP.
Yeah.
And there you can run a very different process and bring vendors in and do demos and run a different sourcing process. But that's quite mature. Nowadays, you get these niche products where they're solving a problem. Is a tender really the right thing? Do you want to spend 3 to 6 months for a Word RF? And so procurement hinders themselves. And so I think procurement's got to get out of this, dilemma of saying, yeah, but I got to do a tender because my policy says I got to get 3 suppliers, even though I know there's only one. I got to find 2 others and send them an RFP, and it becomes long, protracted, it wastes time, energy, money. And I think there needs to be an agile way of doing things, which I fundamentally believe is pure collaboration. Get a supplier, get multiple suppliers in a room with a customer and say, guys, how do we solve this problem? And I know you're competitors or not, but how do we solve this? How do we work together? And it's unlocking that. It's uncomfortable, right? And I think doing the uncomfortable is what's really needed in procurement. Too often we're just comfortable hiding behind a policy and, hey, it's the way we've always done things. And I just fundamentally disagree with that, and which is why I love driving change. We need to do things differently.
For sure. And I think that within that, it's an interesting dichotomy, right? And you understand the mindset of procurement. It's almost the perfect citizen, kind of syndrome in the aspect of that when they're going to market, they want to go to market in the right way. But it's a unique situation because they're buying something for themselves, which they're also not incredibly used to. It's like a parking assistant that's used to handing out tickets that needs to drop their kid off at school. They don't want to stop in the red zone because they know that it's illegal, right? But they need to drop their kid off at school. So instead they circle around the block. And I think that this mindset can be changed. At the same time, I think that you hit on something that's very important there, right? What is the best fit for you? And this isn't just about procurement technology. There's a broader application of that mindset as well. I could talk to you all day, Daniel. I really could. I think that this has been a fantastic insight into the mind of somebody that's developed in their career and is a true leader in the procurement space, and it can be inspiring to those that want to be able to lead. I'd like to round off by asking, what is one thing that you now know today that you wish you knew at the beginning of your career?
That's a good one. I wish I probably would have paid more attention to data and information, right? It's sort of been a little bit of my Achilles heel. Having been very high red and yellow, I tend to get a little bit of information and just run with it, right? Vision and strategy. And sometimes you can get it wrong with not having a fundamental look at data, right? And I think, and again, I'm allergic to numbers. And I realize that if I need to sort of do the job that I want to do, data is just fundamental. And so I got to put twice as much time into looking at data to ultimately extract the insights and the information, right? And so nowadays I would tell anyone, you got fantastic tools, right? Like ChatGPT, for example, can write an entire procurement strategy. It can do so many things. But don't get lost in the fact that you still need to look at the content of what's being produced. You need to bring your expertise and experience to it. And don't assume ChatGPT and these AI models are going to have 100% data accuracy. Data will still be wrong, right? So you really need to give that eye and that experience and saying, but there's something wrong here. This data doesn't look right. So I need to make sure I understand it. And when you understand data as numbers, right, then I think it becomes much easier to make decisions, right, to take risks, etc. And as a leader, if you're the one taking the big decisions and taking the risks, if you haven't fundamentally done your homework, facts and data, it's tough.
For sure.
It could hurt.
There always needs to be that application of HI, human intelligence, on top of the AI as well,
absolutely.
Right? I would love to round off with a quick fire round. One word or one sentence answers to things that have nothing to do with procurement. How's it sound?
Great.
All right, let's get into it. We have a saying in Swedish called paradrätt. It means like the dish that you're going to impress somebody with if you have them over for dinner. I'm coming over for dinner. What's the paradrätt that you're making, Daniel?
Salmon and orange sprinkled with dill right on top.
Very nice. Sounds very Nordic, fitting with the Swedish snow that I'm looking out at the moment.
It's one of my favorite dishes. You basically marinate a nice chunk of salmon in orange juice for 24 hours. And then you put it in the oven, and then you sprinkle some dill over it and a little bit of salt and pepper. And it's just fantastic. So
Sounds lovely. What's the one thing you miss the most about Canada?
snow,
All right. Food wise, what's the one thing you miss most about Canada?
maple syrup.
Lovely. All expenses tripped, paid for you. You can head with your family. You can go by yourself. Where are you heading tomorrow?
Oh, good question. The Maldives. I love turquoise water, and I've heard great things about it.
Very nice. One podcast or book that's on your bedside table, something you listen to continuously. It can be either personal or professional, that you would tip our listeners about.
I don't listen to podcasts, and that's the interesting thing, which I should.
Understood. So you won't be listening back to this particular episode.
No, I will actually. But again, I think, my 15-year-old son, he's always got his headphones on, and we always ask him, "Hey, what are you doing?" He says, "Yeah, I'm listening to a podcast." And so, podcasts about what? Yeah, I'm fascinated about what happened during World War One. Okay. I think if there would be any podcasts I'd listen to, it'd probably be about history. I'm always fascinated by, sunken ships and treasures and, things of a historical nature. I have listened to one podcast, I'll be honest. It was around stress management and trying to do some sort of mindfulness. So I have listened to one podcast, Sam, is about mindfulness and stress management.
All right. Well, then the way we source will be the second podcast episode that you maybe listen to in your near future. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on today's episode, Daniel. It was fantastic having you on. If people want to learn more about what you're doing or get in touch, what's the best way to be able to do so?
LinkedIn. Yeah. So I'm always active on LinkedIn, always welcome new LinkedIn connections. And again, I'm very open to connecting and having a chat and exchanging ideas with my peers.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for today's episode.
Sam, I thank you very much. It was a great time.